Good morning. If you're live, another casual morning hang. It is Wednesday morning. If you're here live, hit that like button, subscribe. If you're not here live, hit that like button, subscribe. Thank you. And you can check out the podcast down in the description below. If you missed, you probably didn't, but if you did miss Kyle Juszczyk, that interview, you can go check it out. As expected. I mean, maybe I didn't really think about whether or not what he said about Trey Lance would get attention, viral. I don't know if that's the word, but would get attention, and it did because anything about Trey Lance or Brock Purdy or Sam Darnold at this point gets attention. And if you missed it, it was at the very end of the interview, and we didn't. I actually do have the clip. I could post just the clip, but if you wanted to hear it in its context, and the context is always important, you can go to the full interview and just go all the way to the end. It's right there at the end. But I'll post the. I hate to post it now because I don't want it to be like I don't want to make more of it than it was. But anyway, if you missed it, Kyle Juszczyk said Trey is beloved. He works his ass off. Everybody loves Trey. He wasn't at the basketball game with Sam and McCaffrey, but it's not because he's not well liked. Same. It's not because he's not well liked. And I think that's the important part of it. I just want to talk about it today because I think it's kind of interesting how it gets consumed, how it gets distributed, how it gets interpreted. And the context of it is important. So the context of it was not, hey, what do you think of Trey Lance? How's he playing? Right. The context of it was Juszczyk going out of his way to say, you guys are right a lot. But here's one thing I heard on your podcast that was very wrong, and let me address it. And I think, for him or anybody in his spot to bring something up, it probably would not be, well, that one time you said I was running an arrow route, but that's the incorrect terminology of that route, right? You wouldn't, that's too nitpicky. It would have to be something that was egregiously incorrect, right? And he felt that was egregiously incorrect, so he said it. So what I've seen is some people, and I've got some DMs, and I've seen some of the, some of the comments, is that his omission of talking about Trey as a player was an indication that he doesn't think he's a good player. And I think it's important just to point out the context of what that conversation was, which was, here's a thing that I thought was so blatantly wrong. And if you're friends with somebody or you respect somebody and somebody says, yeah, nobody likes that person, or that's not really exactly what was said, but people go, well, I wonder, maybe he's not, then I think you kind of can take that personally. And I don't know if offended is the word, but you go like, hey, let me at least correct this. This wrong is worth my time to correct, right? And that's kind of the context of what that was. We didn't, if you noticed in the interview, we didn't talk about, I'm sure you noticed, if you watched it, we didn't talk about really much about Brock. Although this is why it was kind of funny. It was really funny when John asked him, have you texted Brock? Like, how's his shoulder? It's a legitimate question, right? B, if Brock was not hurt and had been the 10-year starter, the quarterback, you would ask that question of the franchise, right? Let's say Brock been this 10-year starter for the 49ers. They won 3 Super Bowls. Let's say Brock was Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, just like franchise quarterback. You said, hey, have you texted Brock lately? Not a funny question. Just there's no ulterior motive. And that was part of the fun of it, was like Juice knowing full well it's a legitimate question. And also, it's also the kind of thing, anything I say could become an inadvertent story. The one that he did kind of delve into a little was Darnold in OTAs. And he said, you can't really tell much about quarterbacks in OTAs. So I say all of that to say, when you go, well, he talked about Trey as the guy, they like him, but he didn't talk about Trey as the player. We didn't really talk about any of the quarterbacks as a player. So I thought it was a stand-up thing for Juice to do, to take his, here's let me take this one moment to say this one thing about this thing that was very wrong, because I would imagine for those guys who are real human beings, it turns out, but also understand the business of the NFL and media and all that. I don't know if you saw the Jets were like, well, we have to do Hard Knocks. We're going to do it, but we're not going to show you cuts. That's inhumane. Which actually kind of, I wouldn't do it either if I were them. That's the beauty from a consumer standpoint of the original Hard Knocks is nobody had a choice. Now they do. And if I was getting cut in that spot, I wouldn't want that thing on film either. But they have a starting quarterback. It's Brock Purdy. They have Sam Darnold, who, he's barely played with. And they have Trey, who truly he's barely played with, but clearly he respects. The one thing that see, that's why I can't read comments while I'm trying to think. The one thing he knows that everybody who plays for the team, who works for the team, who covers the team, and who watches the team knows is that anyone of the quarterbacks on the 49ers roster can become the 49ers quarterback at any time. Instead of play like a champion today, the sign should read, anyone can be the quarterback at any time. It is always said of backup quarterbacks, prepare like you're going to play today. But on the 49ers, they all really know it. Meaning, at any given time, any one of these guys has to be physically ready, also in the right mental headspace to play. He knows that. He knows that Trey Lance could be their starting quarterback, could be third on their depth chart tomorrow, and could be their starting quarterback by week 2. He knows it. I've seen this comment twice. What does felt like 49er football? Did he say that to me? Did I miss that quote? Juice has to have some self-awareness. Felt like 49er football. This felt like an overcorrection 10 months later. What's up, Jesse? Good to see you. Explain that to me. I'm not following that one. In the meantime, I'll read a compliment. Juice was an awesome interview. Very genuine guy. Interesting to listen to. Agree. Yeah, I mean, I think this was kind of, everybody is on board with that. By the way, here's the other thing. New York Post. New York Post. Like, normally I go to the New York Post for pictures of what the AT&T, like, oh, here's what the AT&T girl looks like, not in the commercials. Like, oh, New York Post. And Knicks coverage, I guess. So that was there. This morning, I just went Trey Lance news just to see kind of where it ended up. And I do have to say thank you to 49ers Web Zone, David, because a lot of the, news outlets that picked it up from him. A lot of times some of this stuff has to be, if it's not on social, if it's not going viral on social, has to be, in some sort of print context on digital print online, because it's just, it's easier to consume that sometimes than finding a video clip, especially since we did not post that specific video clip, or I think John did on Instagram. But so David, if it doesn't go there, it probably doesn't get the attention. Not that, that's part of it. It's like, I want people to notice the interview because I think it's good content, and you want more people to find it and you want it to grow. Right. But I don't want it to get attention for the wrong reason, or like for some gotcha moment or whatever. And that wasn't, I mean, it was that wasn't that. But anyway, so David posted, great credit. Great. Fine. Thank you. I appreciate that. And then the New York, it ends up a million places. Like, we got the Bleacher Alerts. Some places don't quite attribute properly. Pro Football Talk. But whatever. I mean, Bleacher got it right. The New York Post got it right. Largely thanks to David, because a lot of it came from there. So appreciate that. Yeah. Mm, I see. The comment about after Garoppolo came back, it felt kind of the same. We've been running the ball since the first snap, so that's what we're kind of that's why I was kind of getting that. Not too much has changed. Felt like 49ers football. I I honestly, I'd have to go back and watch him say that to remember how I felt about it. I don't remember how I felt about that quote at the time. Um, but that's right. That did happen at that moment in time. Yeah, I don't. I think a lot of times the guys on this team are put in positions of saying something that supports the starting quarterback, and the starting quarterback changes a lot. Crocky, thank you. Uh, King, I'll just well be an in a intermediary here. Um, who's your interior decorator? Unfortunately, it's me, and nothing has gone up in almost 2 years here now. Other than this thing John gave me. I got something. I got to get framed. I'm gonna put that up. And there was a shelf here that I took down because I didn't want like the same bookshelf background, but I haven't replaced it with anything. So I'm open to ideas. Maybe put a lamp over there. It's not good. Uh, yeah. On one hand, I'm like, well, I'll go minimalist, but it doesn't actually look like anything. So it's me. And that's a bad thing. Side note, feels like the camera's always just a little out of focus. Yeah, you know what happens is I think I zoom it a little bit and it makes it worse. But anyway, Juice just doesn't like running RPO all game, I guess. Yeah, back to what Jesse, I guess that could have been part of that. Again, I'd have to go back and watch that quote to remember how I felt about it, but it could have been part of it is their offense had changed and then it changed back, right? And that's why, and this is not Juice Kyle related, but that's why we always say, like I've always said repeatedly, I don't think it's safe to run Trey Lance 15 times a game, but I also think that's, Kyle Shanahan tells you what he thinks about what the offense needs to be, what he wants it to be. You want mobility at a quarterback, but you don't want that. But anyway, the one thing Hard Knocks this year will be interesting. It'll be interesting to uh it'll be interesting to see the Zach Wilson. I thought of something because I was just texting with somebody. Um I don't know if it posted yet, but I was talking to Jeff Schwartz and he made a comment. I think he was going to point it out. I don't know if he did it yet. I was just chatting with him and he said, "Oh, I'm about to do my podcast and I'm going to talk about that show, The Quarterback on Netflix." He said, "Notice who Pat Mahomes didn't. Like just watch on the sidelines who they talk to, who they don't talk to, that sort of thing." So I only watched like half of the first episode, but maybe I'll watch a little further. But that type of thing of just kind of diving in. So anyway, I mean, you know, um, I think it's important that they like Trey Lance, and I think it's important that they like Brock Purdy, and I think it's important that they like Sam Darnold. There's a certain level of talent where it's not important if anybody wants to quote unquote go to war with you. Um, you know, Rodgers has that level of talent. I don't know. I'm not saying that people don't want to go to war with him, but I'm saying he has that level of talent. Um, but to this point, the 49ers whole situation is because of their quarterback musical chairs is always somewhat tenuous, right? They bash you over the head with talent at at so many positions that are just it's ridiculous, right? I went through it yesterday, but like when we were talking about the running back numbers, right? They've got prime Kittle, prime Debo, prime McCaffrey, prime Juice, prime Warner, prime Bosa, prime Mooney Ward, prime Eric Armstead, prime Dre Greenlaw. I remember when I did this yesterday, I left somebody else out. I guess in theory, pre-prime Elijah Mitchell, who knows? Extended prime Trent Williams, pre-prime. Yeah, I'd say early prime Ayuk is the way I put it. And And then the quarterback situation changes every day. So it's the margin is just so thin. It's like every little positive that quarterback brings to the table is an important positive. Rocky, I wonder why they couldn't build on what Trey did against the Texans. Completed 70% of his passes and only ran 8 times. Great question. I mean, it's hard to know what they could have built on, what they couldn't have built on, because he never, even the handful of games he played were not back-to-back games. I was listening. I'm through 4 episodes of the Play Callers, I think, or 5. There's one more of the podcast on The Athletic with Kyle and Mike McDaniel. Which, by the way, it was interesting. I was listening to the last one. Mike McDaniel made comments about he's seen play calls be made for emotional reasons. And I would love to know specifically what he's talking about. But one thing Kyle said was he doesn't call plays the same way, right? Opponent quarterback, opponent coach, weather, all of those things come into consideration. It's hard to know what, that Bears game would have looked like if it were in Santa Clara. I always go back to the Seattle game, the game he got hurt in, unfortunately, in which he was on pace. He was on. And now what happens we know this with Kyle and with all play callers, I guess, but specifically with Kyle, what happens in the first quarter is not necessarily what's going to happen in the third quarter, right? So I've probably been a little unfair to say so far in that game he threw it. I don't remember the exact number, but basically he was on pace for a 2-to-1 pass to run ratio. That's a lot of runs. Maybe that wasn't what it was going to be later in the game. But this is what I always think about when we think about Trey. It's like everything is an evolution. Everything is an evolution. Whether AI evolves, right? It's like we're all just you're getting some information in, you're building on it, you're stacking more information on that, you're getting more experiences, Who did I hear? I think it was Andrew Whitworth in the Play Callers podcast said that Hunter S. Thompson, I think it was Hunter S., the famous writer, used to take when he was like younger, he would take works of other great writers and just retype the exact same thing they wrote to feel what it felt like to have written something great like that. I mean, that is a hell of a process. I think it's genius. At some point, I know from my experience, like when I think about like the play-by-play stuff that I do, if I go listen back to the stuff I did when I was in college, or just out of college, when I was doing AAA baseball, it does not sound like me to me. Like it takes time of just trying other things and to figure out like what your voice is in that regard. And from a quarterback standpoint, this guy played 1 year of FCS football. He's played like 1 college football season in 5. I don't want to rehash this whole thing, but like, yeah, I'm with you. Guess what here's what would have happened. Let me guarantee you what would happen if Trey Lance played 17 games. He'd have games that look bad. He'd have games that look really good. How do I know that? Well, quarterbacks that play for Kyle Shanahan all have games that look really good. And then you reach a point where you max out what their abilities are. And he moves on. Mullins, Beathard. Do you remember the draft stories, how badly he wanted Beathard? Then you reached a point where you maxed it out and you move on. And you go, can't get what I need here. And he's just not a starting quarterback. I also believe, and people who played real football would know better than me, but I also believe you play 17 games, you're just gonna have moments. Every guy. If the problem is not having a moment, it's not being able to make a play here or there, the Ben DiNucci's of the world. It's just being good enough to stay on the field for 17 games. So, yeah, I mean, that's it. There was no doubt in my mind he would have built on it. Now, what would it have eventually after a year or two? You go, is there more here? Is it getting better? Has it peaked? It's hard to talk about Colin Kaepernick in just a football context with hindsight, but it felt like that thing was limitless at the beginning. Ron Jaworski said he could be the greatest quarterback of all time. And regardless of what you think about how it ended, it was clear to everybody that trajectory had changed. that trajectory had changed for sure. Alex says, I am. So anyway, I say all that to say, yeah, there would have been good stuff. Now, several years later, will we be going, there's still more to get? I don't know. That's what we, at this point, all feel kind of robbed of. Alex says, I am, for whatever reason, emotionally invested in Trey. I think it was probably due to when they made the trade and everyone built up the draft, all the guessing, all the ham videos. Yeah, a lot of ham videos. Y'all set them up for failure. I don't know if that's to me or y'all, the media, or the commenters, but if you can't stay on the field, it's just going to be really hard. That's not my opinion right now. I'll tell you that. I've said that through OTAs. My opinion is not that. Could become that, but it's not that right now. Hugh says, just read a Robbie Gould interview with Mayoko on NBC Sports Bay Area. He made some pretty interesting comments on Moody and being a rookie kicker in the league. That is interesting. I've not seen that yet. I know where Mayoko was, and I know Robbie Gould was at the golf tournament this weekend, so I'm guessing that's from there. But I want to read that because the Jake Moody part of the season is a very interesting part of the season. What was the number? I think 11 double-digit wins or something like that. 11 most in the Niners had the most quote-unquote blowout wins in the league last year. So in theory, you can get away with a kicker learning on the job, but nobody gets away with a kicker learning on the job. They're just too important. And they do play in a lot of close games too. So, and they're trying to, win playoff games and all that. And Robbie didn't miss in the playoffs. So that's, it's going to Niners OTAs. It was the first time in forever that I paid attention, like really paid attention when the kicker kicked. Everybody did. Like you could feel it. Kyle would set up a spot. Moody would take some kicks. Everybody was locked in. Everyone was like, how far was that? How far was that? That would have been good from 64, right? That would have been good from 64. That would have been. Did he have a tailwind? Was it a crosswind? Was the wind in his face? Would that have been good with a real pass rush? All that kind of stuff. There's a lot of pressure on him because of the quarterbacks. It feels like right now that's not as big of a story, but when the preseason starts, it's going to be a huge story. And occasionally guys miss kicks, and that's going to be a big story when it happens. Yeah, this is a good point. Kyle did his homework on Lance and loved the mental aspect of the game most. When they drafted him on a Thursday night, that night we were on for hours. Late that night, I talked to somebody from the 49ers when they were driving home, very late. And one of the things that person said was they loved, as you would imagine, they drafted him third. They loved all the intangible stuff with him. They loved the guy. They really loved the guy. Kyle really liked the guy. So, this is a lot of more of the same. Obviously, the headline and the thumbnail of this video have turned into other conversations as they usually do. But, that is, they were right about, I think, based on what Juszczyk said, they were right about that. They were right about the guy. Sometimes people can trick you. But John has said this for years. It always makes me laugh. Is like when you do a draft, when he would do these like draft interviews with guys, and they'd show up in like 3-piece suits. It's like what a like that's a scam. Like don't be fooled by the scam. But they that was a part of it. How not just like the guy, but how smart he was, that he had the capacity to pick all this stuff up. Got to play. You just got to play. And I, for one, have not given up on the possibility that anybody that starts the season as a 49ers quarterback might end up playing quarterback again. So I do not approach this situation like we've seen the end of Trey Lance's opportunities. I don't. That's because I don't think to this point Darnold has proven to be good enough to keep Trey just completely out of the mix. So I don't. I have a little. It's probably not optimism because it's not. I'm not about. It's not optimistic. It's not about being optimistic or pessimistic because a lot of the stuff gets that way, like emotional. And we've not been that way about Trey or this whole thing. Um, in an ideal world, he becomes the franchise quarterback, or somebody does, and we stop doing this every year. And they win a championship because of it. Um, but we've watched enough of this to know that I don't think we should talk about this stuff in absolutes. Like it's absolutely over. Like he's absolutely. It has failed to this point. When you draft a quarterback third and you still don't have a quarterback, that has failed to this point. But once upon a time, Alex Smith had failed and then he succeeded. Time's not out yet. That's sports. Clock isn't over. Clock isn't at zeros. All those things are, a lot of these things that we say with sports analogies, we say because they're true. When the clock does not read zero on Trey Lance's time as a 49er yet. And the good news is, if he gets that shot again, sounds like he's ready. And that he'll be embraced. Anyway, that was a fun one. I didn't, a comment. This was basically like a comment about a comment that was on our show. But it was just really just an excuse to jump on and hang out a little bit casually in the morning. So thanks for hanging. Thanks for jumping in. And we'll talk soon. Hit that like button and subscribe on your way out the door. Half of you are not subscribed. So we would appreciate that very much. And as always, keep the comments coming. Yeah, I think people are doing that. Yeah, that's right. I mean, sometimes it's just, the inevitable. Could be. All right. Thanks, y'all. Later.